Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. Today we will be visiting my progress report series. This is where we take a look at a few versions of an athlete to see where they've improved, stagnated, or sometimes where they've gotten worse. We're going back to the Arnold Classic today. I wanted to do a couple of progress reports on some of the competitors that were there, and now we have time to do so. So let's get a report on James the Shed Hollingshead. We're actually going to keep his progress report very recent. We're going to take a look at what was his best recent version, in my opinion, the 2022 Arnold Classic UK. Then we'll go to last year's Arnold Classic Ohio and compare both of those versions to his most recent from this year's Arnold Classic. With these chosen versions, we can see how James improved in just 1 year and compare it to his recent best. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into today's video. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. And this will be one of my videos with the face cam new format. You guys said this format was alright, even though I didn't particularly like it. It was fast for me to do and edit, so I figured why not give it a second shot. Anyway, this progress report is, I don't know if you can say positive, but I don't know if you could really say negative either. I guess if you're looking for progress, it certainly is negative. We're starting with a weaker shot here for James, that being the front double bicep, and I wanted to start with a shot like this because with a worse shot for you, it should be prime real estate for you to improve. You should be able to make improvements quite easily because it's starting out as one of your worst shots. And this is a bad shot for James because it exposes a structure. His shoulders aren't really that wide, the lats aren't that wide, and the waist is quite wide. So overall, his structure is really exposed here. Not the best pose, but like I said, this should be prime real estate for him to be bringing that waist in, expanding those legs, although they were already pretty big to begin with, expanding on those arms. But as you can see, there isn't a whole lot of change year to year. In year 2022, you have the biggest physique out of the bunch, the best, most balanced legs. Overall, probably the most mass up top between the arms and also the lats. You do have a little bit of a Fig Newton, if you catch my drift, in the nipples. This is before he had gyno surgery. So yeah, you get a little bit of that, but overall this is the biggest package. Fast forward to 2024 and you get the most streamlined package and probably the most conditioned package as well. Lighting and things play a factor, and these comparisons always show how much lighting and angles really do matter. I would still call this the most conditioned version overall. Is it the best peak? That's really hard to say, especially with the physique like James's, but overall, we can see more lines in the quads. I do want to mention there is a quad imbalance. You can tell that one quad is smaller than the other. He did have an injury, and he has confirmed that. Because both quads start out so big and one is just slightly smaller, that it's still like pretty good. It's just the other one is so big and the other one is a bit smaller now that you notice the imbalance. But most cut quads, smallest waist out of the bunch, I'd say. And then the arms, they're not that good on any version, maybe a bit smaller here, but overall, this is probably the most streamlined version, at least the most conditioned. And then you have the 2025 version, which is closer to 2024, but honestly, with 2025, nothing really stands out to me. The leg imbalance got a bit better, but now he's neither the most conditioned nor the biggest, so really, what's jumping out to you? Nothing, to me at least. To me, James's physique works best when he's playing to his strengths. He should be trying to be big, honestly. He's, I would say, a mass monster. He's 5'11", I believe, and he's over 300 pounds in the off season. He's a big guy, so I know he tries to play this teeter-totter game where he comes in big but yet shredded, and then he blames it on the peak every time because he can't play both. He can't do both at the same time, apparently. Honestly, when I take a look at all these versions, and this is just what I prefer out of these three versions, I'm not saying which one would do better in a lineup, but 2022 is my favorite. I think his physique works better when he plays to his strengths. I think it's a powerful pose. The front double bicep is meant to be a powerful shot, and he looks the most imposing there, the biggest legs. And honestly, sure, 2024 is the most streamlined, but with just the extra width in the lats, he looks pretty good proportions-wise in 2022. 2025 has got to be last year just because nothing stands out. You don't get extra cuts in the quads. In fact, even though 2022 is probably the least conditioned, at least from the front, you get more quad separation there in 2022 that you do in 2025. And then the midsection is the most washed out in 2025 as well. The arms are also mid and probably the smallest on 2025 as well. It's one thing with 2024, you get the extra cuts with no size, well, with less size, but in 2025 you just don't get anything. So if you ask me to rank these versions, which I will in every one of these shots, I would go in descending order as you see them here. The 2022 version would be first, the 2024 version would be second, and then the 2025 version, this year's version, would be last for me. Next we have the rear double, so we're flipping these guys around. These guys, I mean, they're all the same guy, but this one actually did really surprise me. I have to say, just based on what I can see here, again, we're dealing with fairly minor differences, but again, what I can see here, this is getting worse. 2022 is probably the least conditioned, but at the same time, it still looks pretty good. Like, take a look at that lower body condition and the lines in the glutes and the dugout hams compared to every other variation. It's certainly the biggest lower body, and with it being on par with the most shredded version, which is either 2024 or 2025, it's a deadly lower body. I'm very impressed with James's lower half from 2022. And in the back, sure, he will have thinner skin in these later two versions, but honestly, I think that fuller back just helps. Sure, it's not the more conditioned back, but just having a fuller back, you get enough details and you get more overall thickness and you get more of that dense factor. Again, this is James playing to his strengths. In 2022, it appears he wasn't over dieted, and that really helps. Sure, again, not the most conditioned, but it works for him. And then I'm going to go ahead and rank these guys again, and once again, it will be in descending order. So that means 2024, the middle version, will be in the middle of the pack, so second. The lower body on 2024 and 2025 is basically the same. I mean, I think the lighting makes the most difference. But then the back is a little interesting. 2025 is, I want to say it's kind of a posing issue, but if you really look back and forth, I don't think it changes a whole lot in terms of the posing. James is just kind of getting a little more narrow, and that's not very good. He was already very, very narrow to begin with. As you can see, even in 2022, it's not a very wide back. But in 2024, he has these extra details. It's just a more shredded version, a more over-dieted version of 2022. But then 2025 is probably an even more over-dieted version for that. I guess I prefer the lower body, but again, could that be the lighting? Probably. Is the lighting making the back on 2024 look better? Maybe. But overall, like, I just don't think 2025 is that good. You get the least amount of details overall, and the back looks the narrowest. It doesn't look that big. This is a case where, yet again, James needs to play to his strengths. And as you can see, when he gets further away from that, he gets worse. The least conditioned version, or at least the biggest version, 2022, is running away with this pose as far as I'm concerned. And then 2024 and 2025 are just basically the same thing, if not a little worse on 2025. Next, we have James's absolute worst shot, and I picked this one out. I always like to get a mix of poses for these guys. I like to include bad poses just so we can see how they're improving, again, prime real estate. It's like the front double. James has had ample opportunity to improve this. Usually these guys that have bad shots have genetic shortcomings, but it's interesting to see what these guys can do over time with some of their weakest poses. And here, it's up and down for James, I think. I do really like the twisting shot itself, like the execution on 2022. I know it's not a head-on abs and thighs, but really you can see the abs. They're there. They're not really that bad compared to what we're about to get to, and you get the obliques and the quad down there. Sure, not the most separated up here, but it's big. It's separated enough, I would say. I'd certainly like to see it more separated, but overall, you can just tell genetically he's not that good, but I think this is a pretty good case of making the most of what you have. I don't think you can do too much better than this, but let's take a look at the other poses. 2024 is just an absolute train wreck. Best quads up here, most separated, most conditioned quads for sure, but this head-on abs and thigh shot, I know I'm always talking about you should do a head-on abs and thigh shot so that way you don't get docked points, because we don't want variations where you're twisting or where you're doing a vacuum to hide the abs. You want to do the head-on abs and thighs, but here in James's case, it's just better to be docked on points than to display this. It shows he has absolutely like no taper, and then his actual abs, yeah, they're genetically weak, but we saw that back in 2022 and they were still more separated there. Here, they're asymmetrical, muddy mess. This posing just doesn't work. And I think this version, I've seen enough to probably call it the most conditioned, but the problem is he's the least full. And as we've said, James wants to teeter this line where he can do both. And sometimes it's probably just better to go in the fuller territory than more conditioned. But here, when he is going all the way into more conditioned, that skin, because it's not full, there's a barrier between the muscle and the skin. The muscle needs to push up against the skin for James. And here it's just not. You can even tell this in his quads. Like, he's the most conditioned here, but like, is he that much more detailed than the other two versions in the quads? No, absolutely not. It's a very minute difference. This is because the condition is there, but the overall peak, including the fullness of the muscle, is not completely there. But this is James's Achilles heel. This is what we always talk about. He's a big dude. He can easily come in over dieted, and he hardly recovers with the peak. He hardly can land the plane. But then in 2025, he does turn this around a bit. I would say he has okay overall legs. They're the weakest up here, but they're fine. They're fine. We still need some more separation there. And then the abs are actually pretty decent. I would say they're actually better. Like, they're actually a little bit more blocky than even 2022. They're jutting out of his abdomen more, which is great. They're still not the best, obviously. Genetically, he has a shortcoming. The obliques, pretty diced, even more than 2022. And the abs, like I said, are protruding more than usual. The taper, not that good, but overall, second best abs here. But that only gets him so far in the overall ranking. For one, 2024 is dead last in this overall ranking. But I would put 2022 ahead of 2025. 2022 has the second best abs, pretty close to the first, and then the better quads over 2022. So you get better averages when you add both the abs and thighs portions. So it's close. He did bounce back in this post a little, credit to where it's due, but I would still only put the 2025 version as the second best version out of the three we're looking at today. And we're going to go ahead and end with the most muscular, and we're ending pretty anticlimactically. Now, James's most muscular is so solid because what I was saying earlier, he's taller, but still carries a lot of mass for a tall guy. But yet again, this barely changes in 3 years we have on the screen here. I barely can point out changes. This is another one where, yet again, I think the lighting, the color of said lighting, the color of the tan that he's using, and then just the overall photo quality is probably going to matter more than what he actually brought show to show. And it's kind of the same thing we've been talking about already. 2024 is the sharpest, 2022 is the biggest, 2025 is like a mix of both, I guess you can say. With me not being there and with lighting and photo quality playing the biggest difference, I don't really have a hard ranking. You guys can let me know yours on this shot down in the comments, but I'll give you my soft ranking. I would put 2022 in first. He's the biggest version. It just makes sense he's first and the most muscular. And then 2025 is second. I feel it's a good mix between 2022 and 2024. You get a good amount of size, but also a good amount of details. I use that term lightly with James because you don't get a whole lot of actual good details from James. He's just not a very detailed physique, but overall he's a good mix. I think 2024 leans too much into the other direction. And that means 2024 is third in this shot. It's not that much different than the others, but you know, you have the worst abs on display here and a shot that displays the abs pretty prominently. This, you know, it's not a hands clasped where the hands are in front. He's exposing the abs, and that variation 2024 has the worst abs. So that pretty much automatically puts him in third with that version, but also I just prefer the bigger, fuller versions for this shot. Yeah, he's the most detailed here. He's got the thinnest skin, whatever. That's just not the look for James, in my opinion, and it's just not the look for this pose, most definitely. It's the most muscular. Overall, this progress report really isn't negative, but is it positive either? No, not really. In a sport that's all about progress, when you're not making any, it does become a negative reality. Sure, James against himself isn't getting a lot worse. That's a major success. Building a physique is hard, but maintaining it isn't easy either. But James exists in an area where everyone is making drastic transformations in a matter of a year, sometimes even months. He's still improving some things like the quad imbalance from 2024, but other than that, I can't really say he's improved anything besides subsides a little in the way he's peaked. At the same time though, I wouldn't really say he's regressed either. I think a lot of the changes we saw today can just be chalked up to lighting, video quality, tan color, etc. They can also be chalked up to the fact that James has almost never peaked 100%, and James has the type of physique that varies quite a bit more than usual with a proper or improper peak. So all in all, while it's not an outright regression, it is for sure a stagnation, and that's arguably just as bad in the modern era. I will say though, I think the 2025 Arnold is probably a bit above average for James. We've seen worse, but also better. I would still say it's closer to his best versions though. It's just really by a few percent, however, but he's been a bit more accurate with this peak in recent years, and this 2025 version was fairly good. Even though it received the worst placing, I don't think it was the worst version out of the bunch today. I have it as second best out of the group we looked at. He worked with a coach this time actually, Boss of Outlaw, and with this being their first time peaking together, they were able to pick up right where James left off last year, where he was bouncing ideas off of everyone and their grandmother for advice. This does make me a bit more hopeful for the near future. If James's main issue is peaking, then hiring one of the best coaches out there and actually listening is probably a good remedy. But I still do prefer the 2022 Arnold Classic version out of the three we looked at today. I think outside of James nailing it 100%, a version like 2022 is going to be the best you can get. It was a pretty conditioned look, but he was very full and massive. He played to his strengths and it worked. He wasn't over dieted and stringy like some of his other versions, and he wasn't too overblown and under dieted. But keep in mind, I believe the consensus is still that James's two 2020 versions are his best, better than 2022's. I don't know if I really think that anymore, but again, that seems to be the consensus. So while this year's version was a bit better than last year's, it still falls short of the 2022 version we used. And that version falls short of his true best version from 2020. I don't really think it'd be too hard for James to get back there though. If it truly is just a peaking issue, then all he has to do is find that recipe for success and bring it again. He's bigger now since 2020, but he's really not bringing that look. Luckily for us and him, he and his coach will have another go around in just under 2 weeks time at the 2025 Detroit Pro. Hopefully there, James and his coach can break through this plateau and create a new all-time best version of the Shed. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. What do you guys think of James's recent trajectory, and what do you think the chances are of him making it to the Olympia once again this year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more, and leave a suggestion on who to do a report on next. And if you want to support my channel even further while getting your hands on some high quality supplements, then head over to Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, use my code Project10 for 10% off your entire order. That's code Project10 at armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
Gotta get that Lexi, yeah.